Now I went to your family, I asked them for you. They all said, take her, oh take her please do. She can't cook or sew, she won't scrub your floors. So I put on my hat, tiptoed out the door, singing so long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. What a long time since I've been home, and I've got to be drifting along. Now the telephone rang, it jumped off the wall. That was the preacher, he was making his call. He said, kind friends, this may be the end. You've got your last chance at salvation of sin. Well, the church, it was crowded. The church, it was packed. The pews were so loaded from the front to the back that the preacher could not read a word of his text. So he put on his specs and took up the collection, said, so long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. What a long time since I've been home, and I've got to be drifting along. Well, friends, I want to tell you a story about a man from Oklahoma, born July 14th of 1912 in Okemah, Oklahoma. Woody Guthrie wrote over 1,000 American songs in less than a dozen years. And he didn't use an original melody for any one of those songs. He did what kids at schools and libraries do every day. He took songs that he already knew, threw away the words, recycled the melodies, and made up new words for those old tunes, and he did it over 1,000 times. And many of those tunes came off the old 78 RPM recordings of the Carter family, Woody's favorite band. Woody just loved the Carter family. And the real testament to his achievement is that today, millions of people still sing the songs that Woody Guthrie wrote. He was born 12 days after his namesake was nominated for the Democratic ticket back in 1912, Woodrow Wilson Guthrie, but everybody called him Woody. From his father, Charlie, Woody inherited a marvelous sense of optimism. And from his mother, Nora, he inherited her love of those old English language ballads as well as some of her madness. In 1907, after statehood, Charlie Guthrie brought his family from Texas to Okemah, Oklahoma. Right after the big oil boom had begun there, Oklahoma was well on its way to becoming the largest oil-producing region in North America. You see, they told the Indians they could live there on the Indian territory for as long as the grass should grow. But once oil was discovered, they kicked those Indians out and they let the settlers in. And Charlie Guthrie was among the first people to get there. He became the first county clerk in Okemah County there. Woody said that his father was a hard-hitting, fist-fighting Democrat. Woody liked to tell people that his daddy was the man who miscounted the votes at election time in Okemah. Charlie Guthrie did pretty well speculating on the real estate boom during that big oil boom in Oklahoma 110 years ago, and he did pretty well. By the time Woody was born, he was pretty well off. Charlie Guthrie built himself a very nice 6-bedroom house on 6th Street there in Okemah. Cost $800, a whole lot of money for a house 100 years ago. And the family lived there. But then as the oil boom moved, as these things boom and bust, so did Charlie Guthrie's luck. And soon the family was living in one rental house after another, moving around, all the way down to some of the poorest places in town. You see, Woody's childhood would have been fairly uneventful if it hadn't been for the fires. The October 5th, 1916, Oklahoma Ledger newspaper reported when Woody was 4 years old that his father, Charlie Guthrie's house, had burned to the ground, set on fire by an oil stove. And 3 short years later, early on a Monday morning, Woody's mother, Nora, decided to keep her oldest daughter, Clara, home from school. Clara was 14 and Nora needed a lot of help with the ironing back in those old days when you used a cast iron and a kerosene stove to heat it up. And Clara had a big test at school she didn't want to miss. She was kind of unhappy having to stay home. And she and her mother quarreled. We don't know exactly how it happened, but Clara spilled kerosene on her dress and it caught fire. She was burned quite horrifically from her knees to her neck. And as she lay dying, she said to her little brother Woody, whom she always called Woodblock, he wasn't even 7 years old, she asked him not to cry, and he did his best to honor her request, running around the house in tears till he finally fell inconsolable into his father's arms. The neighbors read in the newspaper that it was an accident, but they had their own ideas. A lot of them thought that it wasn't an accident. It was in the spring of 1927. Charlie Guthrie was laying down to take an afternoon nap on a Saturday afternoon, and his wife Nora threw a lit kerosene lantern at him, burning him so badly from his navel to his neck that he spent 18 months in the hospital. While he was in the hospital, Charlie's lodge brothers quietly got together and got Nora admitted to the insane asylum in Norman, Oklahoma there, where she lived for 2 more years before her death. While Charlie spent that year and a half in the hospital, the family was scattered. Woody and his remaining sister and 2 brothers became foster children, staying with local families, and Woody Guthrie lived with the Sam White family, 11 family members sleeping in 3 beds in a 2-bedroom shack. 20 years later, in February of 1947, when Woody was living in Mermaid Avenue in Coney Island with his wife Marjorie and their 4-year-old daughter Kathy Ann, Marjorie had to go out and get some milk and some oranges from the corner grocery there. She left Kathy Ann alone in the crib for just about 5 minutes, but while she was gone, the electrical wire of a recently repaired radio shorted out and set her bedding on fire. And she was burned quite horribly. When Woody got home from work that night, there was a note pinned to the door that said, "Come to the Coney Island Hospital at once." The next morning, Kathy Ann died. And there wasn't any funeral. A few days later, Woody and 2 of his best friends and fellow merchant marines, Woody Guthrie's buddies Cisco Houston and Jimmy Longy, walked with him along a moonlit beach in Coney Island, and Woody threw himself to the sand with his arms and legs flailing in the air, and he screamed for 30 seconds. And then it was over. Friends said Woody was never the same after Kathy Ann died. She was the inspiration for those enduring and marvelous children's songs that Woody wrote during her brief childhood. And ironically, just a few weeks later, he recorded those songs for Moash in New York City for the Folkways record label. And they're still in print on 2 CDs called Nursery Days, and the other one's called Songs to Grow On for Mother and Child. 6 years later, in the spring of 1953, Woody made a trip out to Baloosahatchee, Florida to visit Stetson Kennedy. You remember Stetson Kennedy, the man who infiltrated the KKK and snuck to the codes, the man who wrote the scripts for the Superman radio show, and every night those codes were broadcast on the radio, confounding the KKK? Go to the library and look for Stetson Kennedy's book, Unmasking the Klan. Well, Woody went out to visit Stetson Kennedy, and it was Florida, and it was June, so they were camping outside, and one early morning after sunrise, Woody decided he was going to rekindle the campfire, and he decided to sprinkle a little bit of kerosene on those smoldering logs. And the flames jumped up, burning him so badly, the puckered scars left him unable to play the guitar thereafter. As Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie's friend, used to say, the fire gods were after Woody. I ain't got no home, I'm just a rambling round. I'm just a wandering worker and I go from town to town. Police make it hard, boys, wherever I may roam. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. I was farming on the shares and always I was poor. My crops I raised unto the banker's store. My wife took down and died upon the cabin floor. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. Now my brothers and my sisters, they are stranded on this road. A hot and dusty road that 1,000,000 feet have trod. The landlord took my home and drove me from my door. And I ain't got no home in this world world anymore. Now as I wander around, it's mighty plain to see this old world is a great and a funny place to be. The gambling man is rich and the working man is poor, and I ain't got no home in this world anymore. Woody wrote that one in Los Angeles in 1939, recycling an old hymn, "This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through." The first song that I sang, "So Long It's Been Good to Know You," was a song that Woody grew up with. He recycled the chorus and he made up his own verses to that. And he recycled the melody from an even older ballad called The Ballad of Billy the Kid. Didn't use an original melody for any one of these. They were all recycled songs, just like kids on school campuses do all over the United States today. Now, in the 21st century, Woody Guthrie is a folk hero, but he wasn't always as such. And if you want to be a folk hero in the United States, there are two very important things that have to happen. Half the people have to be for you, and half the people have to be against you. If you do not get this peculiar dichotomy, you will, folk hero-dom is just going to evade you completely. And that's how it was for Woody. You know, they were very ashamed of Woody Guthrie after he died in the mid-1960s. They were going to name, Woody spent 30 days up on the Columbia River where I live in Oregon. And in those 30 days, the government paid him $266 to write songs. And half the songs that Woody Guthrie wrote were written in that 30-day period up on the Columbia River. Well, after Woody's death, they wanted to name a power station on the Columbia after Woody, but all the businessmen in Hood River came out with signs that said, "Commie, commie." And they changed the name of that station. But today, in your century, Woody's a folk hero. You go down to Okemah, you'll see the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival, the Woody Guthrie Restaurant, the Woody Guthrie Hotel. Everybody's cashing in on Woody's fame today. But it wasn't always the case. He's sort of become a folk hero today. And I want to talk to you about another folk hero who grew up 17 miles from Okemah, where Woody grew up. You know him as Pretty Boy Floyd. He was a farming kind of person. And then he read in the newspaper one day that he had robbed a bank. It kind of surprised him because where he lived down there in Oklahoma, the real criminals were the banks. One by one, the farmers saw their neighbors losing their farms to the banks. The banks were the bad guys. When that depression hit and they saw these young men with pistols show up and rob the bank, they cheered them. They were heroes. The banks were the bad guys. So when Pretty Boy Floyd saw his name in the paper and saw that he had robbed a bank, he thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. I'm broke and I'm losing the farm. So he got some pistols and he started robbing banks. He didn't last very long at it. He died at the age of 30 when they finally shot him down in 1934. But those farmers in Oklahoma, they cheered Pretty Boy Floyd. And they hid him and his men and his vehicles because he was robbing the banks, and there was nobody the farmers hated more than the banks. So Woody took an even older ballad about an older criminal that none of you remember, a fellow by the name of Floyd Collins. He took the tune from the Ballad of Floyd Collins and he wrote his song about a contemporary villain who grew up 17 miles from Okemah. I'm talking about his song about Pretty Boy Floyd, which he wrote in Los Angeles in 1938. You gather round me, children, a story I will tell about Pretty Boy Floyd, the outlaw. Oklahoma knew him well. It was in the town of Shawnee on a Saturday afternoon. His wife beside him in the wagon as into town they rode. Well, a deputy sheriff approached him in a manner rather rude, using vulgar words of language that Mrs. Floyd overheard. Well, the pretty boy grabbed a long chain, and that deputy grabbed his gun, and in the fight that followed, he down. Then he took to the trees and timbers to live a life of change. Every crime in Oklahoma was added to his name. Yes, he took to the trees and timbers on the Canadian River shore, and Pretty Boy found a welcome at every farmer's door. It was many a starving farmer, the same old story told, how the outlaws saved the mortgage and saved their little home. Others tell you about a stranger who come to beg a meal, and underneath his napkin he left $1,000 bill. It was in Oklahoma City, it was on Christmas Day. There came a whole carload of groceries along with a note to say, well, you say that I'm an outlaw, oh, you say that I'm a thief. Well, here's a Christmas dinner for the families on relief. Now as through this world you travel, you'll see lots of funny men. Some will rob you with a 6-gun, and some with a fountain pen. But as through this world you travel, and as through this world you roam, you won't ever see an outlaw drive a family from their home. About 25 years ago, when I was living in San Mateo County, Woody's son Arlo came through to play the Unitarian Church. So I bought a ticket and I went to see the show, and I guess there might have been 300 people in that church. And before Arlo began the concert, he said to everyone sitting there, I'll never forget it, he said, you know, I made more money tonight than my father Woody Guthrie made in his whole career. It may have been an exaggeration, but his point was well taken. Money was never the thing that Woody made. It's funny, near the end of his life when he was laying in a hospital, the Weavers, a folk quartet, had a big hit with one of his songs, was the #1 song on the radio for 6 months. 6 months, too late in Woody's life to enjoy the money. Earlier in his career, when he had a brand new car, he saw somebody in worse shape than he was, and he gave that fellow the keys. He was a strange fellow with interesting values, and there are good books in the library to read about Woody. You would be inclined to leave this program and go and get his autobiography out of the library. It's called Bound for Glory, published in 1943. It's a page-turner, but there isn't a word of truth in it. I don't know why it's still in the autobiography section. They ought to move it over to the fiction section. Woody Guthrie didn't have a lot of time. He wanted to be famous, so he wrote a page-turner of an autobiography. They even made a movie about it with David Carradine. You can rent the movie out of the library, but it's not a true story. If you really want to know about the life of Woody Guthrie, there are 2 books that I recommend you look for in your library system. Look for a book by Ed Cray, C-R-A-Y, called Ramblin' Man. And look for another book by a fellow named Jimmy Longi, L-O-N-G-H-I. The book is called Woody, Cisco, and Me. These are the 2 definitive nonfiction books about Woody Guthrie if you want to know the true story of his life. But most people are interested in the legend of Woody Guthrie. It's far more interesting and dramatic than his own life. And that's available to you too at the library. Now, Kathy Ann, Woody and Marjorie's first child, didn't live but a few days after her 4th birthday. Marjorie was a Martha Graham dancer in New York City. Quite a class job to have for dancers at her time or any other time in American history. So Woody stayed home and take care of the kids, went out and played gigs on Friday and Saturday night. So Woody followed Kathy Ann around. He wrote down everything she said. And if you've ever spent time with a 3 or a 4-year-old, you know the sort of things that Woody wrote down. Yeah. So let's sing some of these children's songs that Woody wrote. They're the songs I grew up on as a 1 or 2 year old leaning against the table with the phonograph record playing on the turntable. They're the first songs I heard. I still have my 10-inch Folkways record, Songs to Grow On, that I've listened to my whole life. These records were out of print for some time, but they're on CD now if you want to do something really special to the grandkids or great-grandkids in your family. Treat them to Woody Guthrie's children's songs. Would you sing one with me? Would you be in the mood for singing? Y'all brought your singing voices? We're at the library here, and these songs don't really work unless everybody sings along. This is an oral tradition sort of program. So here's, Woody took an old American folk song called I Was Born About 1,000 Years Ago, and he recycled that melody, and he made up a song about a little game you play with a 3-year-old. You've probably played it with kids in your family. I'll help you sing with me. It goes like this. Now, I do school assemblies. I've done about 5,000 of them. I've sung for 1.5 million kids in the United States, and when I have a K through 3 group in any one of the 50 states, this is the song I start with. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Put your finger in the air and leave it about a year. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Try another verse with me. Put your finger on your head, on your head. Let me hear you do it. Put your finger on your head, on your head. Put your finger on your head. Tell me, is it green or red? Put your finger on your head, on your head. Try another verse. Put your finger on your chin, on your chin. Put your finger on your chin, on your chin. Put your finger on your chin, cause that's where the food slips in. Put your finger on your chin, on your chin. Try one more with me. Put your finger on your nose, on your nose. Put your finger on your nose, on your nose. Put your finger on your nose and tell me if it grows. Put your finger on your nose, on your nose. Hey, try one more. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Put your finger on your knee. Most kids I know have 2 or 3. Put your finger on your knee, on your knee. Try one more verse. Put your finger on your shoe, on your shoe. Put your finger on your shoe, on your shoe. Put your finger on your shoe. Leave it a week or 2. Put your finger on your shoe, on your shoe. Well, you've tried the easy verses. Woody made up one verse that's just a little bit harder to do, but even the smallest people in the room can handle it if you use your full powers of concentration. It's the verse that goes like this. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger, on your finger. Put your finger on your finger, on your finger. Well, we all know this song. Why don't we do this? Why don't we all sing that first verse about putting our finger in the air? Let's all take our fingers and point them straight up in the air, and we'll sing it together the way people did in the old days before smartphones. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Let me hear you sing it. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Put your finger in the air and leave it about a year. Put your finger in the air, in the air. Oh, what a marvelous job you all did. Give yourself a round. Woody's mother, Nora, loved the old English language ballads, and she passed that passion on to her son, Woody Guthrie. He took a lot of the oldest English language songs and recycled their melodies. They're collected in the library in books called child ballads, not because they're for kids, but because Professor Francis Child, born back in 1825, the folklore professor at Harvard in the 19th century, he collected all these old English language ballads and gave them each a number, and people so revered Francis Child, they didn't really pay attention to the ballads he didn't number, and everybody spent 100 years concentrating on those child ballads. And you'll often hear them referred to, and people think they're for kids. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're not really children's songs. One of them discusses one of the most horrible things that happens in the experience of parents and children. Often teenagers take their own lives, making a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And every generation of human history has experienced this tragedy. So there are a lot of old English language ballads about it. And the oldest one I know is called The Butcher's Boy. It's been around for about 400 years. So I'm going to sing you one verse of The Butcher's Boy, and then we'll see what Woody Guthrie did with the melody of that old English ballad, Tragedy. In Jersey City, where I did dwell, a butcher's boy I loved so well. He courted me both night and day, but now with me he will not stay. You know that song because it's the same story in Grieve, Oh Grieve, Careless Love. There is a tavern in the town, and the water is wide. It is a common problem in an English language balladry. The teenager who's upset because I gave thee this, I gave thee that, and yet thou would not love me, and now you're in love with her. So here's what Woody did with that song. He spent a lot of time with his 3-year-old daughter, Kathy Ann, giving her a bath. And so Woody took that old English language tragedy, made a children's bathing song out of it. It went like this, same tune, different words. Mama, oh mama, come wash my face. Come wash my face. Come wash my face. Mama, oh mama, come wash my face. Make it nice and clean-o. So these are the kind of children's songs that Woody Guthrie made up. He took the old hobo song about the Danville gal, good morning, Mr. Railroad Man, what time do your trains go by? 9:15 and 2:44, 25 minutes to 5. He took that song and he made a song out of it about the kind of questions that children ask, Kids ask questions about the world. Why this? Why that? Why the other thing? That's how they find out about the world. And if children ask parents questions when parents have a full belly of food, a good night's sleep, and a good mood in their mind, they're going to get really intelligent answers. But if they ask those questions when the grown-ups are hungry or cranky or tired, they better be careful because the grown-ups are likely to go like this. They're likely to go, because. Woody thought it was hilarious. That 3-year-olds would be utterly sincere about their questions. And impatient, hungry, cranky parents would say, because. So Woody did what he always did. He took that tune, The Danville Gal, and he made a children's song out of it about the good questions children ask and the not-so-great answers parents sometimes give. Try singing this one with me. It goes like this. Why can't a dish break a hammer? Tell me why, oh why? Well, for one thing, a hammer's got a mighty hard head. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. And the chorus went like this way. Why, oh why, oh why, oh why? Tell me why, oh why? Just because. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Can we sing it together? Why, oh why, oh why, oh why? Tell me why, oh why? Just because. Goodbye, goodbye. Why can't a bird eat an elephant? Tell me why, oh why? Well, for one thing, an elephant has a mighty tough skin. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Let's sing it together. You ready? Why, oh why, oh why, oh why? Tell me why, oh why? Just because. Goodbye, goodbye. Why won't you answer my questions? Tell me why, oh why? Well, the truth is I don't know the answers. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. One more time. Why, oh why, oh why, oh why? Tell me why, oh why? Just because. Goodbye, goodbye. Woody Guthrie. Woody's tunes came from all over. In fact, when you study the sources of his melodies, you see how musically literate he was and how many different genres of music he appreciated and enjoyed. Anybody in this audience who has had a child or a grandchild or a spouse beginning on a musical instrument, has been subjected to a melody that Robert Schumann wrote for his 3 daughters in 1844, The Happy Farmer. Let me play a strain of it on the autoharp, and it will quickly come back to your mind. It went like this, it went. Written back in 1844, and there are no instruments that you can begin on where that is not included in the book of songs beginners must learn on their instrument. I had a stepdaughter who was a fiddler, and we tried that one for a year and a half. So in 1907, I want to remind this audience that 110 years ago we did not have political correctness. It is a recent invention. As someone who sings traditional American folk songs, I am always clashing with political correctness because the popular music of 100 years ago was anything but politically correct. It used all sorts of words that nobody mentions in a library anymore because the words are considered to be pejorative or derogatory. They had popular songs 100 years ago that made fun of how immigrants talked, the color of their skin, how they cut their hair, the fabric that they wore for their clothing, the food that they ate on their holidays, and the religions that they worshiped. This was all fair game 100 years ago for songwriters. So you have to appreciate that when this song was popular in 1907, it was a whole 3 generations before the invention of political correctness. The song was called Red Wing. It was about an Indian woman who was longing for her Indian brave, and the verses discussed their relationship. Today, the song is politically incorrect, but I want you to know in 1907, it was as big as Elvis Presley, and everybody sang it, and it sold hundreds of thousands of copies of sheet music, and as soon as it was recorded on those old 78 RPM records, it was recorded by popular singers. Now, I want to remind you, those records cost $1 a piece 100 years ago. That's about the equivalent of $20 today. That's why when your great-grandparents died, those 78s were still in the family, because nobody could bring them to throw them away. Imagine the tchotchkes you'll leave behind that cost $20 each, and you can say, these are too expensive to take to the Goodwill. I was the kid who collected those 78s. I would go to my friends and say, here's a $5 bill. Do you think you want to bring me your grandmother's 78 RPM record collection? I have apologized to all of those friends in my high school and junior high school reunions. So let's do Red Wing, the popular song 110 years ago. There once was an Indian maid, a shy little prairie maid, who sang night and day a love song so gay as on the plain she galloped far away. She loved a warrior bold, this shy little maid of old, but so brave and gay he rode one day to battle far away. Oh, the moon shines tonight on pretty Red Wing, the breeze is sighing, the night bird's crying. Oh, far neath the stars her brave is sleeping, while Red Wing's weeping her heart away. An innocent little song, or so it may seem today. It was popular 5 years before Woody was born, and he grew up listening to that. So at the Communist Party's office in Oklahoma City in 1940, Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie were there together. They got $2 to sing for the group. You'll discover, as I have discovered in my career, that it's so hard to get work as a folk singer that you'll sing for any group. Even if it's the people you aren't going to vote for. If they're paying you to do a gig, what do you care? This is your job, and you're supposed to sing for everybody and not be prejudiced. So Woody Guthrie wrote articles for the Communist Party's newspaper back in the days when the Communist Party was as innocent as the Green Party is today. My grandparents and many of yours were card-carrying communists in the 1940s before it was demonized, before Joe McCarthy and the Red Scare. It's a cautionary tale for those of us who belong to third parties today. So in Oklahoma City in June of 1940, Woody and Pete had a gig. Have you ever seen photographs of these men? Woody Guthrie was a short fellow, so they had to split the microphone. The microphone was way here above Woody's head. Woody had to tip his head up to sing because Pete Seeger was 6'2" and lanky and tall like a beanpole, and he'd always be bending down to that microphone. But if you look in the books in the library, every photo you see of Pete Seeger, he's got his head tilted up from his microphone like this, because all those years of touring with Woody, he learned that's what you're supposed to do with the microphone. Since Woody did it, so did Pete. It's true. Look at the pictures if you doubt me. So Woody wrote this song. He took the old tune of Red Wing, Robert Schumann's melody, and he thought that since we're here singing for a bunch of union people, and I remind you, before unions there was no middle class in this country.
Yeah.
And as your unions are disappearing, pay attention. So is our middle class. I will be doing the week of Labor Day in Wyoming and Montana, my program of Labor Day folk songs, and I will be singing this one, the one that Woody wrote in June of 1940 in the Communist Party's office in Oklahoma City. He said, since we're singing about union people, instead of a Indian maid, how about if it was a union maid? So here's the song, Woody. There once was a union maid who never was afraid of the goons and the ginks and the company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the union hall when a meeting it was called, and when those company boys came round, she always stood her ground. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Till the day I die, you gonna sing with me? Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Till the day I die. You notice how those words just fall right out of your mouth when you try to sing them? It's the perfect union of lyric and melody. You can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. It takes no effort to say it. If I've sung for many, many union groups, and if you're going to go out on a picket line, it's scary. You're not going to have income. You might get arrested. You might even get beat up. And one of the ways you keep people organized and calm and collected is by giving them a song to sing in a frightening situation. It was popular in the union movement and in the civil rights movement, and I imagine all of our movements will be singing movements because that's how you keep people together. So that's how that just falls out of your mouth. You can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. It's so easy to sing. That was Woody's great gift. Marrying the perfect collection of words, the perfect lyric to the perfect tune. He did that so well that people don't sing the old words to the tunes anymore. They sing Woody's words. In the interest of full disclosure, I am the son of a labor lawyer and the grandson of 2 union officials. So if this program seems a little lopsided, that's how I was raised. My mentor was a gentleman by the name of Sam Hinton. Sam was born in Tulsa on March 31st of 1917. He lived most of his life in San Diego County. He sang for 6 million kids down there, and Sam was the curator of the Scripps Aquarium from 1946 to 1964. You probably visited that marvelous aquarium down there. So Sam Hinton told me a great story. See, he went to Texas A&M during the Depression. His parents didn't have a whole lot of money. They wanted to keep him close to home. They were hard years. Sam wanted to study zoology. Texas A&M is a peculiar school to choose to study that particular discipline. So here's what they did in 1935. They sent, it wasn't 35, it was 37. In 1937, they sent all those zoology students out to Imperial County, California, out there by the Salton Sea. I believe it was 123 degrees there yesterday, and it is only the beginning of summer. These zoology students were sent to measure the internal temperature of horned toads. Since this is a family program, we will not discuss how this is accomplished. Go to the library and read about it if this is your particular interest. It was in the 120 degrees, and these students from Texas were accustomed to these temperatures. And at night, Sam spent his time collecting folk songs, because you all probably know that the largest environmental disaster of the 20th century was the Dust Bowl. Farmers in the Plain States grew the same kind of hybrid Russian-German wheat in the same place, year after year after year, exhausting the soil till it was finer than talcum powder. And finally it all went up in the air in a black cloud so large it shadowed the towers of Manhattan. Some 300,000 farmers were permanently displaced, some of them to starvation, some of them to death. Look at the pictures in the library, how waves of the ocean, this black dust, covered the barns, and the cows and chickens and sheep stood on the rafters and the roof of these buildings. These farmers took off their shoes because their feet were so blistered and swollen they couldn't wear them, and they walked 2,000 miles to California where they thought they would have work. The worst environmental disaster of the 20th century, the Dust Bowl. And friends, I'm on the road 70,000 miles a year. I'm on my way in September to drive through those plain states. And you know that junk corn crop that they grow, that GMO corn up in the Dakotas, in Kansas, in Nebraska? We're only a few degrees in temperature away from another Dust Bowl. So the only thing we learn from history is that nobody learns anything from history. So Sam went through these refugee camps, hundreds of thousands of Okies and Arkies with their children, all using these tiny little streams for toilets and kitchens and bathrooms. All of them there displaced, hoping to get work in California. And Sam collected the same song in every migrant camp. Slightly different versions, but the same song. Years later, he found out that song had been written 24 months earlier by Woody Guthrie in Oklahoma. The song that was called The Talking Dust Bowl Blues. These Okies and Arkies had taken this song and made it their own. Usually in folk music, it takes generations before a song moves into the oral tradition and people own the song and make it their own. But in 24 short months, this song was so appropriate to these Okies and Arkies' experience, they all had a different version of Woody Guthrie's song, The Talking Dust Bowl Blues. Along about 1927, I had a little farm that I called heaven. The price was up and the rain came down, so I hauled my crops into town and I got the money. Bought clothes and groceries. I fed the kids. I raised the family. But the rain quit and the wind got high and a black old dust storm filled the sky, so I swapped my farm for a Ford machine and I filled it full of that gasoline and I started a-rocking and a-rolling, heading out west to the good old California Peach Bowl. Way up high on a mountain road, it was way up there on the piney woods. I got pretty fast, wasn't even stopping, bounced up and down like popcorn popping. I had me a sort of a breakdown. It was a nervous kind of a bust down, it was. There was a feller there, a mechanic feller. He said what I had was called engine trouble. Way up high on a mountain road, I was way up there in the piney woods. I give that rolling Ford a shove and I started to coast as fast as I could. I commenced coasting. Picking up speed. There was a hairpin turn. I didn't make it. Well, man alive, I'm telling you, the fiddles and the guitars really flew, and that Ford took off like a flying squirrel, flew halfway around the world, scattering wives and children all over the side of that there mountain. Well, we got out to the West Coast, broke so dadgum hungry I thought I'd croak, and I bummed up a spud or two, and my wife cooked up a tater stew, and we just poured the kids full of it. Mighty thin stew, though. Could have read a magazine right through it. You know, I always did figure if that stew'd been just a little bit thinner, some of these here politicians could have seen through it too. When I was young, it was very hard to get the source material for this program. You had to go to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. and go through their collection. They had to order what these call a needle drop. They would record it onto a reel-to-reel or cassette for you and send it to you and charge you $40 an hour to do so. Well, now all this material's in the library. It's on DVD and CD, and it's on YouTube. So in March of 1940, Woody Guthrie was invited to the Library of Congress by Alan Lomax. If you go into the folk music section of the library, if you find books on folk music, you're going to have the name Lomax on the spine. John Lomax published the first book of cowboy folk songs in America in 1910. His son, Alan Lomax, was the man who collected music for the Library of Congress. So he interviewed Woody Guthrie in 1940 at the Library of Congress, and Woody Guthrie told the following story. Woody didn't like to drive, he liked to hitchhike, he liked to be the passenger, have somebody else do the driving. Woody was riding in a farmer's pickup truck when they stopped to pick up an old gray-bearded farmer. They picked up this farmer, and the farmer said, "This depression is so hard, I haven't worked in 10 years, but I just paid a contractor $10, he's gonna get me to California, I'm gonna get $5 a day to pick fruit." Now, Woody Guthrie was very well traveled. He had made a number of trips to California in the 1930s. He saw all those Okies and Arkies displaced and out of work, and he said to this man, he said, "Did you already give the contractor the money?" And the man said, "Yeah." And Woody said, "How much did you pay him?" The man said, "I paid him $10 to land me in California, where I'm gonna get $5 a day to pick fruit." And Woody said, "Well, I don't need to be a soothsayer or to be negative, but I want you to know I've been to California a few times." He said to the farmer, "If you see a $5 bill in California, it's going to be because you're at a bank looking through the metal bars, the teller holding it up." The farmer said, "Oh, no, there are these handbills that the farmers distributed. It says, 'Come to California and pick fruit for $5 a day.'" And Woody said, "Yes, I've seen those handbills. They've taken advantage of you Okies and Arkies and distributed them all over these mid-plains states." He said, "When you get to California, here's what's going to happen. The rancher's going to take you out to the orchard after you travel 2,000 miles from Oklahoma. And he's going to say, 'Oh, the peach crop this year is so poor, I'm not even sure if it's worth bothering to pick it. Tell you what I'm going to do. Since you're out of work and you're starving, if you can pick and pack and load onto this truck 1 ton of peaches, I'll give you $1. And if you're not interested, you can just take it or leave it.'" Woody said, "If you say a $5 bill, you're going to be in the bank, and the teller's going to be holding up through the bars." If you go to California, friends, whether it's 2017 or 1937, you better have plenty of that do-re-mi. So Woody took a song from 1908 called "Hang Out the Back Door Key," and he made this song about it in 1938 in Los Angeles, California. Thousands of folks back east, they say, are leaving home most every day, heading the hot old dusty way to the California line. Across the desert sands they roll, getting out of the old dust bowl. They think they're going to a sugar bowl. Here's what they find. Well, the police at the port of entry say, "You're number 14,000 for today. And if you ain't got the do-re-mi, boys, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, well, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee. California, it's a garden of Eden, a paradise to live in or see. But believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got the do-re-mi." Now if you want to buy you a home or farm that can't do nobody harm, take your vacation by the mountains or the sea. Don't swap your old horse for a car, you better stay right where you are. You better take this little tip from me, 'cause I look through the want ads every day, and the headlines in the papers always say, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, boys, you ain't got the do-re-mi, well, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee. California, it's a garden of Eden, a paradise to live in or see. But believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got the do-re-mi. Yes, believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got the do-re-mi. In May of 1943, the Liberty ship, the William B. Travis, slipped its moorings at midnight and sailed down the Buttermilk Channel at the New Jersey harbor, bound for the submarine killing grounds in the Atlantic Ocean. And on deck were 3 merchant marine sailors, Woody Guthrie, and his musical pal Cisco Houston and their friend Jimmy Longy. One of the ways men with children could avoid being drafted in World War II was volunteering for the Merchant Marines. And Woody and his two compatriots worked as busboys and waiters and dishwashers, serving food to the 3,000 troops on that Liberty ship. The men were confined, 600 men to a hold, 5 holds way at the very bottom of the ship. The Merchant Marines were up on deck in their tiny, minuscule Lilliputian cabin. And then at one point the captain picked up on the sonar the pinging of the submarines, and they began to drop the depth charges, the bombs to blow up those submarines. Well, they explode very close to the metal hull of the Liberty ship, and they reverberate in the cabin where these teenage soldiers are sleeping, 5 of them high, stacked to the ceiling in bunks. It scared these men to death. Woody Guthrie stood up in his tiny little cabin on deck and said, "Oh, I hear the depth charges. The soldiers must be scared to death." He put his harmonica in his pocket and picked up his mantle and said, "I'm going to go down and play for them." And Jimmy Longy said, "Are you crazy? If we get hit down there, we'll all drown. Stay up here on deck close to the 6, count them, 6 lifeboats they had on that Liberty ship for over 3,000 people." And Woody said, "Well, suit yourself. It's up to you. I'm going to go down and sing for the boys. I think they're a little scared." And Jimmy Longy remembered many years later that he thought Woody Guthrie was a saint. He said a saint disregards his own safety and does something for his brothers. He said Woody was a saint. He went down there to play for those guys while the bombs were going off. He said, when you hear those depth charges going off, you want to go up on deck and put your hand on a lifeboat or climb a mast. Jimmy Longy remembered that Woody was a saint. And out of guilt, Woody looked at Cisco and Cisco looked at Woody, and they picked up their guitars and they followed Woody Guthrie, and they went down to the number 3 hold. There were 600 sailors in that hold. Terrified, some of them only 17 or 18 years old, stacked 5 high in their bunks, with the depth charges exploding and the metal walls reverberating. So calmly, Woody Guthrie picked up his guitar and began singing a song he'd written in November of 1941, back at Almanac House in New York, where he'd seen in the newspaper about the sinking of the Reuben James. And he started to sing for the men. Have you heard of a ship called the Good Reuben James? And those hard-fighting men, both honor and of fame. He flew the stars and stripes of the land of the free, but tonight she's in her grave at the bottom of the sea. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? Will you sing with me? Let's give it a try. Oh, what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What were their names? Tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? Oh, 100 men went down to their dark, watery grave. When that good ship went down, only 44 were saved. 'Twas the last day of October when they saved 44 from the cold, icy waters by the cold Iceland shore. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? It was there in the dark of that uncertain night that they watched for the U-boats and waited for the fight. Then the wine and the rock and the great explosion roared. They laid the Reuben James on the cold ocean floor. Let's sing it together. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? What were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the Good Reuben James? Now many years have passed since those brave men are gone, and those cold icy waters are still and are calm. Many years have passed, but still I wonder why the worst of men must fight and the best of men must die. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on good Reuben James? What were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? Well, by the time Woody finished, he had all 600 of those soldiers singing along, and the depth charges had gotten quieter, moved away, and the submarines were gone. And satisfied, Woody turned around and smiled at Jimmy and Cisco, and they picked up their mandolins and their guitars and put their harmonicas in their pockets, and they walked out of the hold, the number 3 hold there. They were going on their way back up to find the stairs, to find their way back up to their cabin on deck, and they heard gospel singing coming out of a lavatory. Back in the days when those lavatories were tiled with ceramic tiles, so the acoustics were marvelous. So they followed the sound of that singing, and what they found was 50 black soldiers in the men's room, all singing a gospel song and clapping their hands in 4-part harmony. I remind this audience that an army segregated in peacetime was segregated in wartime. The black soldiers were confined in different places than the white soldiers, and they had separate bathrooms, a colored bathroom and a white bathroom. These soldiers were singing in the colored bathroom. Woody stuck his head in and said, "That's about the best singing that I've ever heard. Can we come in and join you?" And the black sergeant said, "You can't really do that. This is a colored toilet." And Woody said, "I don't care. It's the best acoustics on the whole ship." So he went in there and he kicked off John Henry, and they all joined in. And in 5-part harmony, they were all singing John Henry with Woody on the guitar and Cisco on the mandolin and Jimmy Longy picking up the harmonica. And a white corporal came down the hall. And he heard black soldiers singing with white men. And this was not permitted. So he went and he reported it to the captain. The captain went to the colonel. The colonel pulled the files on Guthrie and Houston and Longy, and he discovered that these men were in the Merchant Marine. So he sent the corporal back and said, "The depth charges are starting again, the bombs are going off. Get those 3 white guys out of the colored toilet, get them back in the number 3 hold singing for the soldiers." So the corporal went back and he said, "You have to go, the colonel says so." And Woody said, "Well, I'm just going to stay here because I'm not going to sing for those soldiers unless these 50 black soldiers can come with me and be in my choir." Well, the corporal was furious. He went back to the captain went to the colonel. The colonel looked carefully at the files and realized these men were in the Merchant Marine. They were not subject to military law. He had no authority over them at all. Now the depth charges were getting really loud, and the walls of the ship were reverberating, and he said to that corporal, he said, "I don't give a damn what you do. Get those 3 white men and those 50 black soldiers into the number 3 hold singing for the soldiers." So, back into the number 3 hold, Woody and Cisco and Jimmy went, with the 50 black soldiers behind them, now a choir of 53 men singing for those soldiers. Woody Guthrie with his guitar, which had the words handwritten around the sound hole, "This machine kills fascists." Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? What were their names? Tell me what were their names? Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? A number of years ago, I performed a Christmas concert at this library. I played in 2,000 libraries from the Everglades to the Arctic Circle, and I want you to know you can play anywhere once when they invite you back. That is the greatest compliment. I was so delighted when I got the email from Paul, and he said, "We want you to come this summer and do your Woody Guthrie program at our library." Now friends, I played at 2,000 libraries, I travel all over the United States doing this work, and I come to California once or twice a year. I'll be back in December to do my Folk Songs of the Winter Holidays program, and depending on how you complete the evaluation forms after this program, they may even invite me back here to the Livermore Library.